Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Unfollowing Mum. How is everyone? It feels like it's been a bit frantic this past week with the election and everything that's been going on. It feels like it's been a wild week, and we've got a new puppy as well. So I have been panic and I'm not sleeping. It's back to like newborn stages. So bear with me, please. Today I have a guest with me. I'm really excited to chat to her. We're going to stay anonymous for this one, guys. So we will be well, I tell you what, I'll let you tell people what we're talking about. So hi, and what is it that you've come to talk to about?
Hi. So I have come on podcast today to talk about how that I have maintained a relationship with my mum
Hmm.
after confronting her about things that happened to me and to my sisters um, when I was younger.
Yeah.
Things that I've stored and locked away in my brain for a lot of years. I guess I kind of got to over 30 and started to process it, 35 now. Um, and then I let it in. And then I kind of got to this stage where I was like, this is going to have to come out. I'm going to have to, have the conversation and say, this was not okay. And I guess I want to talk about how that for me, that hasn't involved any kind of estrangement, but how the relationship with my mum and also stepdad, who I will tell you about, um, looks now and how it's changed and, the boundaries that are there now. But I guess it's so that any of the listeners that might have been in a similar position can see that it doesn't always have to end in, that estrangement, that it still can be a relationship, though it may differ.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And one of the things that I always wanted to do with this podcast was kind of have as many different voices so that people who have grown up in these difficult family dynamics or who've grown up with abuse, who have had these experiences, can feel like they're seen and validated. And quite
Mhm.
often on the podcast, we talk to people who either are estranged or who have very low contact relationships, and they haven't been met well when they've tried to speak to parents about things. So I think it's going to be really interesting to hear your perspective of how you've managed to kind of have those difficult conversations, but also come out
Yeah.
the other end with a relationship intact. And that's not to say that anyone who hasn't had that experience and hasn't been met, that that's at any fault of theirs or that that will happen every time.
No.
God knows so many people will try and speak to their parents and just not be met with any validation or understanding. But I think it's important to hear from people who have, because what does that mean for the relationship afterwards if you do want to continue it and your parent is willing to work
Yeah.
with you? And I don't think we talk about that very often, probably because it's not terribly common. Often it's
No.
just defensiveness. But so you mentioned that it all came to a head for you and it was all these things that you'd stored up. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what your childhood looked like and what these experiences were?
Yes, absolutely. So my parents broke up when I was around 2, so I don't remember that breakup.
Mm.
So for me, my two older sisters, they do remember that, so they remember my father being around. Um, but for me, my childhood, my earliest memories are when stepdad was already there. And obviously these things can be quite difficult to talk about.
Mm.
Um, but I guess what we're mainly talking about here is covert sexual abuse.
Yeah.
So a lot of, I mean, at the moment, I am through the NHS talking therapies, having EMDR therapy,
Yeah.
which is very difficult at the time because you have to you're very closely revisiting these memories. Um, but I am finding that useful, though it has,
Mm.
like I said, brought them very much to the top. So it was very much a lot of sex in front of me, a lot of talking about sexual things from
Mm.
being very young. The first memory that I went back to in the EMDR was 4-year-old me. Um, Wakes up in the morning, goes to get in bed with mum, like a lot of kids do,
Yeah.
and kind of freezing and the feeling of helplessness, not being able to move because they are in fact having sex next to me.
Mm.
And I'm, it's not just kind of like a, I don't know how to put this, but like a private, oh, she won't notice thing. It's full on.
Wow.
And this kind of thing happened daily. It didn't matter if I had a friend to stay over. So when I got to like 6, 7, 8, and I had friends over, that didn't change anything. It was never quiet. It was never. It was really kind of in front of me. And again, through this EMDR, what I found is that when I go into these memories, it's this feeling of helplessness, like I can't move, and like it shouldn't be something that I'm part of,
Mm.
or and I'm waiting for them to then come and parent me, because the difficult thing about the feelings that I've got around this is that after those moments, I would then be parented with love and with care and do nice things with my parents, well, with mum and stepdad. But but for me, I guess part of me growing up thought that these were perhaps the norms.
Mm. Yeah.
And when I got to, I guess, my 30s, I had conversations with both of my sisters who said to me, yes, this did happen.
Mm.
And I guess talking through it with them made me realize how real and how brutal and how horrific it actually was. I mean, I've only given you one small example there, but there was times when, my sisters would kind of be invited into this kind of sexual content. So, what flavor ice cream should I put on your mum's, parts today? That was asked to my sisters. So, just it was just constant, this sexual behavior and around us all the time. And I guess we've kind of always kind of joked and kind of laughed it off. But from as being a listener of your podcasts, it's kind of it rang a massive alarm bells. Like, actually, that was not okay. That was so not okay. And I kind of got to the point where once I started to remember everything, I was actually going into panic. And I felt this sudden, like, I am going to have to speak to her. This is going to have to come out. That was not okay. And I guess there was a lot of anxiety built up around how she would react and the risk of there being an estrangement, because I have 3 children and their experience and their relationship with my mum and stepdad differs a lot, in that they are very good grandparents. And I don't want to take that away from them, their relationship that they have. And so it was that risk attached to it that was like, how is this going to end up? Am I going to get gaslighted? Am I going to get told, don't be so ridiculous? You've made that all up in your head.
Mm.
That stuff's wrong. But I guess because I have those older sisters, I can be like, no, we all remember these same things. I knew that these were fact. These things happened. And yeah, so it felt like a risk. I will say that. It is a risk to confront the parent.
Mm. And I think it is a risk. I don't think that regardless of what kind of outcome you're looking for, there is that element of feeling risky there, because things are about to change, and change always feels like a risk, whether they're changing in the way that they have for you, where you've had those big difficult conversations but it's not ended the relationship,
Mhm.
or whether they're changing and it's going to be the end of the relationship. The unknown and the change is scary, and that's risky. And I just want to touch on you talking about the covert sexual abuse, because I think
Mhm.
covert sexual abuse is something that is so under discussed and so normalized in our
Absolutely.
society. And when we think about people talking about sexual abuse, your mind instantly goes to someone who has either been touched themselves or who has
Yeah.
experienced that. And actually sexual abuse can be so much more subtle, but the
Mhm.
feelings of shame, the feelings of fear, of helplessness, they're all the
Absolutely.
same around it. They're all there and they're all very present, and it has an extreme impact on the child growing up in that circumstance, regardless of whether it's overt or covert. It's still sexual abuse. And we do
Yeah.
have a tendency to, I think, normalize those things often as being, oh, well, we were just sex positive, or we just didn't want you to grow up
Yeah, yeah.
thinking sex was shameful. There's a big difference between growing up thinking that sex is shameful or growing up being prudish, if you like, where you're teaching your
Mhm, mhm.
children that these things, oh, don't discuss that, which can equal, it can
Yeah.
also be problematic, and actually inviting them to partake in the activity, regardless of in what context that is.
Mhm.
And it does have a huge impact. And I think I'd like to thank you for talking about that because it's such an under-discussed topic, and it's something that I think people really shy away from because you're often told, well, that's not really sexual abuse. And it
Yeah.
absolutely is.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it was made so normal to me.
Mm,
It's waking up and I'd be like, oh God, I'd be hearing it. It's not subtle. I'm thinking, oh God, right, going downstairs, having a look in the pantry, thinking, what should I eat something? Shall I put telly on?
mm,
And I actually remember this one occasion. It's horrific looking back and it's completely embarrassing and I feel utter disgust towards it. But I had a friend staying over and it was the usual morning routine. Here we go, really loud. And we actually dared each other to walk in the room when that was happening, like as a joke, as a laugh, as this'll be funny, you
mm,
know. And it just didn't stop them. So now looking back at that, I'm even thinking that not even anybody that stayed in my house was protected in any way, from this. It was like it was just okay to them
mm,
for for these things to happen. I mean, I know that my sisters have memories that obviously they were older at the
mm,
time, so for them those memories are clearer, and there are things that are more brutal than what I went through in that, they saw things happening right next to me.
mm,
Obviously, they're thinking, "Oh, she's young, she won't remember this, it doesn't matter," that kind of thing. But it went on for so long, and it did kind of curb off a little bit when I got to kind of secondary school age. But I do remember going on holiday, um, just mum, stepdad, and me, um, and we stayed in an apartment that will have been, like one bedroom,
mm.
one
Yeah.
bathroom, one. So I would have been on the put up bed next to them, and it happening, and me just thinking, I cannot escape from this. I daren't move because I don't want them to know
Mm,
that I've listened or I've heard or I've seen, and I know that they're not going to stop if I do that anyway. So I'm better off just lying still and waiting for it to end.
mm,
And that I'll have been in perhaps year 7, year 8 at secondary school. So that's the time period that things kind of went on for. And it did, as I hit, maybe year 11, and then I went off to college, it did kind of go a bit. And then when my sister had their first child, and, we all started to have our own families and things, it's a thing of the past now. And I guess when I go back to mentioning the risk of, speaking to her about it, I guess it's very much, oh, well, we are where we are now.
yeah.
Should I do this because we are where we are now? The relationship's like it is now. That doesn't happen now. But of course, it doesn't happen now. I'm in my own
Mm,
home, with my own
yeah.
husband, in my own children. But it's very much affected the way I parent my children.
Mm,
And it's very much do not give me parenting advice. It's
yeah.
very much do not come here and tell me right from wrong. Um, this is how we do it here.
Mm,
Um, and there's a lot of there's a lot of anger attached to it. At the moment, the anger still lies with stepdad, who I will
Yeah.
say at the moment I haven't personally confronted. But I guess, my feelings are very uneasy around him, but I do think that it's something that will come up in the future.
Hmm.
Should, you know, that would be the next step for me. But I do strongly believe that I will be absolutely gaslighted or absolutely estranged. Now, I know that from growing up in our childhood, he comes before we do.
Yeah.
And that is something we have been taught. We know that. So by me confronting him, I then risk the relationship with mum again. And I'm pretty sure that mum has not had the conversation with him to say, she's told me this. We've had this conversation. I know that hasn't happened
Mm.
because I think his reaction would differ hugely, very much. He's very much, if you're not of the same opinion of him, if your lifestyle's not the same as him, then you're just not good enough. That's what he was like. It's very, he's a narcissist. It's just how it's always been. It's always, our way or the highway, or, we were always seeking their approval growing up. That was what we did, all of us. And it's affected us all in very different ways. I've managed to keep a lid. I'll say a lid because I sort of, as I always say, it's like a box in my head. I've kept the lid on for so many years, and I know that part of it has crept out. And I've had these memories, but as soon as I opened that lid, it just came flooding out, and it was like I could suddenly remember everything and remember all those feelings that I had during that moment or around it. But again, the strange thing is you can't take away those wonderful things that we did do at the same time. So it's very complex feelings
Mm.
around the way I was parented, I
Yeah.
guess.
I think that's why they call it complex PTSD, isn't it? Because it is bloody
Mm.
complex. It's so
Yeah, it is.
difficult because, and it's something that I've warred with myself is looking back
Mhm.
on all those good times. And I think
Yeah.
I know that strictly speaking, we can't gaslight ourselves, but I hold firm to the fact that that language does fit in that we gaslight
Yeah,
ourselves
we do.
because we tell ourselves all of the wonderful things that happened almost as
Mhm.
if to suppress all of those negative
Yeah.
feelings. And it is just trying to put that lid back on it because it's too painful. But it's really difficult when you have had a lot of positive experiences and you have had lots of wonderful memories and you have had those connections and that love and that great side, but simultaneously you've had abuse. And I think that's
Yes.
the lived experience of so many people, and that confusion that you speak about. I think that will resonate so deeply with so many people. So, looking back at when you had a conversation with your mum, how did that happen and how did that come about?
I literally got to the point of panic
Mm.
where I'm just going to have to go home right now and make this call because, I thought about writing letters but it just had to come out there and then because I had to give myself some kind of relief. It got to the point where it didn't matter which way it had to go. It just had to come out. So I actually called her on the phone
Mm.
and she was on her own at the time. And I said, I need to talk to you about something. Um, I'm not sure how you're going to react, but I need to get this off my chest. So I just told her my memories and I told her this was abuse. This was sexual abuse. And that is not okay.
Yeah.
And what I was expecting was perhaps denial or, oh, it wasn't that bad. Come on, don't be silly. But what I got was silence to begin with, which made me think, oh my gosh, where's this going?
Mm.
To, I sincerely apologize,
Mm.
which I had built up in my head all these scenarios of what I was going to say. When she tells me this, I'll come back with this. And,
Yeah,
like,
as you do.
I did. As you do. I had all these things, but, as you tell me this, I'll come back with this and tell you that I know this for fact, and I know that for
Mm,
fact. And, you know, even at the time, I mean, we're going back to the 90s, but, it was sexual abuse and it would
mhm.
have been recognized as such. I'm pretty sure of it.
Yeah.
Um, so I had all these things sort of ready to say, and I was quite stumped at that
Mm.
because I was like, well, I have more to say to you than
Yeah.
this. I was like,
Yeah.
right. Okay. And she just did say, I sincerely apologize for that. And she said, that she thought it was great that I was getting some help with it.
Mm,
And um, yeah, that was it. She just kind of accepted it. And I said to her, I do have very strong boundaries, and I know that I want you to still be in my children's life. Um, but they don't stay over at your
yeah.
house. You're not used for childcare.
Mm,
They see you and we have nice times together, and it's very much my house, my rules now. I'll say
mhm.
no to certain invitations that I don't feel comfortable with. I it's very, this is how we parent here. You don't tell my children off.
Mhm.
This it, and I feel very strongly about it. Because they're very opinionated people. The pair of them are very, uh, quick to jump in and tell you how you should be living your life and what you should be doing. And and I look back at that now and just think, what?
Mm,
You cannot give me any advice on how to parent at all. Um, but I guess after we'd had that conversation, which was probably about an hour, roughly going over things that I remember and reiterating that is not okay. After that, I will be honest, I expected perhaps a long text message,
mm,
perhaps a letter, perhaps a little bit more accountability than what was there,
yeah.
than I sincerely apologize. So, yeah, there was a level of disappointment because I expected her to kind of, I guess, be a bit more sorry. I don't know how to
Yeah.
explain it. I don't know how else to put it. But there was perhaps a few days afterwards where I had more text messages than usual. How are you feeling today? How are the kids? A little bit more checking up on me. I mean, that could have been her working out where I stand with her, she stands with
Mhm.
me. It could have been. Um, and then it's never been really spoken about again.
Mm,
So it's not that it's been swept under the carpet, because I think she knows fine well that it's not.
mm,
But it's that I have the relief from confronting her. I do feel that at some point I'm going to have this moment with stepdad,
mm,
and I'm going to, it's just going to have to come out because, like I say, such an opinionated person who, comes into your home and starts to judge what you're doing. Or, I mean, there's less of it. There's less of it over the past year. And I think that's since I've become very much, um, I'm not happy with that. You can
mm,
leave now.
mhm.
Very, very strong with with my boundaries, I guess. And I think as well, it's perhaps taught my mum that actually, if something doesn't sit right, I am going to tell you.
Yeah.
Um, that is going to come out. But yeah, I guess the reason I haven't done it yet is because, again, it's that feeling of uncertainty in that, am I going to lose mum? Am I
Mm,
going to lose that person in my child's life? Um, but yeah, the relationship differs now because it's very much through the children, if that makes sense. So anything that we arrange to see them is because it's a child's play at school. Would you like to come with me?
mm,
Or it's, we're having a day out in half term. She'll come with us because that, I don't want to take away from them,
mm,
my children. They do love their grandparent. I think they've always had kind of a bit standoffish about granddad, so stepdad,
Mm.
because he's very, sarky comments and inappropriate jokes, and so they've always been a bit. But mum has, she's a good grandparent to them,
Mm.
but it has to stay within my boundaries. So yeah. In summary, the relationship's changed in that those are very strong, very clear boundaries now, and that the relationship is, I guess, based on them seeing my children
Mm.
as and when fits us, and also I guess that family connection to my grandparents, my grandma, um, you know they care for them now, so it's how are they doing, that kind of chit. I guess it's chit chat and it's around the kids,
Mm.
but I won't ever, I guess, be as close to her as before, but not because of the conversation, but because of remembering everything.
Mm.
I guess that
Mm.
respect has gone.
Yeah.
And I look back even at my teenage self and I think, because I was a generally good teenager, I didn't do anything, I wasn't a bad kid. I never, did anything that you would think, oh, this teenager's got issues. I just kind of went with it.
Yeah.
And I do look back at myself and think, damn it, why did you have so much respect for them? You should not
Mm.
have had any,
Mm.
and so I guess that element has gone now,
Mm.
especially with him. And I feel a lot more anger towards him because, looking at it, he was the abuser, but my mother the enabler.
Mm. And this is the tale that I hear time and time again, is where you've got one parent who was the dominant, if you like, in the
Yes,
abuse,
that's
but
the way to put it. Yeah.
the enabler is still there propping up that abuse. And I think one
Yeah.
of the hardest and saddest things about that realization is, as children, we often look at one parent as they're the one that we need to kind of walk on eggshells around. We need to be worried about
Yeah.
them. They're the unreliable one, or they're the one that might suddenly snap at any moment. And we have that fear, if you like, of them or their moods, or we even push back against them. We've got that fractured relationship with them. But we view the other parent as more of the good one. And actually, when you
Yes.
start to look at the good one and think, shit, you enabled all of that, or you
Yes.
participated in some of that.
You let it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so difficult to navigate and so difficult to make your peace with, because you have so many fond memories of them and
Mhm.
of the way that they parented, of the nice things that you might have done together.
Yeah.
And actually your adult brain starts to go, but that wasn't good either. And that
Yeah.
wasn't okay either. And you didn't protect me. And that's kind of your only role. And I just think, as well, to touch on your kids having that positive relationship and what a
Mhm.
great grandma you have in your mum. I think that's something that I hear quite frequently as well, is of this really difficult relationship that you have with your parent, of the abuse that you experienced growing up, but of the difference in them now that they are older, and the difference in them towards your children, and how challenging it can be to maintain that relationship. And like you say, they don't stay over at grandma's house. They're not
No.
left alone with them, because for you, there's still that feeling of, I don't trust you enough to
Mhm.
have them
Mhm.
in that capacity.
Yeah.
I'll be there as buffer. But what I witness when I'm there as buffer is how good you are with them, and how positive that relationship can be, and what a good impact it can have. And that then puts you in a much more difficult position should you think, right, I really want to take a step back.
Yeah. I mean, I would apply the, better grandparent to my mum. Um, because I guess stepdad has always been, I guess he's always made it very clear that he doesn't, let's say, like children,
Mm.
or, there's always is, yes, well, that's why I had dogs instead of my own kids, and it's kind of like, hang on a minute, you chose to be with someone who had 3 children. That was a choice
Mm.
you made.
And you were only
More so than a
two,
choice
weren't you?
more so than a choice of being someone's, actual father. It's like,
Mm.
you actually chose this. But like I say, we very quickly learned that we were second best to him and that he would always be the most important and his opinion would always be the most important. But from him, I guess even towards my children, it's a lot of, like I say, inappropriate comments and sarcasm and digs. And for me, it puts them down in confidence. And I look at my kids' faces when he makes comments, and they're like, "What?" They're like,
Mm.
I don't, I can feel. It sounds silly, but I can feel how I felt when he would make those comments to me.
Mm. Mm.
For example, um, if I ever saw my dad, which was rare, um, when I came home after that, it was always like, "Oh, your dad then," or like, like silly jokes about, he would basically take the mick out of me for seeing my dad and that feeling that he would make. But then at the same time, you're taught, I need to seek their approval.
Yeah.
Therefore, you laugh along too, and you join in with that joke,
Mm.
even though it hurts at the time, because you think,
Mm.
well, I need their approval. I need to be on their side. And I guess that's what made the relationship with my dad less and less and less over the years, was because I was taking the mick out of for seeing him. He was, you know, and at the time I look back and think, God, if I'd have actually told my dad what was going on at the time,
Yeah.
like
Mm.
it could have been so different.
Mm.
Um, it's affected my sisters differently to me. Um, and they are still, I guess, processing. One sister is very angry
Mm.
a lot and will have outbursts, I guess. Um, and the other, I guess, she takes time. She's processing and healing very slowly. But
Mm.
what's been great is that, I've passed her your podcast, and she listens to that, and it is helping people. I think you need to know that, Harriet, is what you're doing is really, and it is, because it's like you say, you're speaking the unspoken, you're speaking what people don't dare speak about, and
Mm.
I think it does, it helps people, which is another reason why I thought, I'm going to go on today and say what it feels like to have that conversation
Yeah.
and how then it changes a relationship, but that it can still be maintained. I mean, I still love my mum.
Mm.
In
Yeah.
phone call, I'll say, "Love you, bye," and but I guess there can't be any forgiveness for those times. There just can't. That's just where I'm up to. But
Mm.
yeah, that's just where I'm up to with this journey, and it is still a journey. Like I say, it still feels to me like unfinished business, I guess,
Mm. Mm.
because I haven't had the conversations with, and I get it might take something to trigger me to just go, you know what, I'm done with this and I am done with you, and these are the reasons why. But
Yeah.
for the moment, I guess I'm just sitting on it.
Mm. I think there's something to be said for being in that space of sitting on it, because so many people
Mm,
find themselves in that space. And as somebody left a comment on one of my Instagram posts I was a couple of weeks ago now, and I can't remember whether I mentioned it on the podcast yet, but it was, I feel like there's such a push and pull from social media. On the one side, I've got, well, you're a bad child or a bad adult
mhm.
child if you don't look after your parents when they're old and you don't forgive, you're not healed, you're just resentful and holding on to
Yeah,
things. And then on the other side, I've got people saying to me, well, if you don't call them out on this and you don't cut ties and you don't force them to apologize for what they did and
mm,
never speak to them again, then you're just weak and pathetic. And I just don't feel like either fits me. I feel like I'm being pushed and pulled from
yeah,
one side. On one side, I'm being told you're selfish and unkind and horrible to your parent. On the other side, I'm being told, well, you're not being hard enough. And so many people find themselves sat in a place where I don't really know what to do with what they were given
Yeah.
and what these memories are bringing up for them. And they're doing their very best to process them, to hold those firm boundaries, to maintain the relationship with the parent that they want, but also perhaps avoiding getting to that point of speaking to the other parent, or perhaps avoiding getting to speaking to anybody about it at all, because they don't really want to cut ties, but also can't quite move past what happened. And
Mm.
it's such a difficult, confusing place to be sat in of, I feel really frustrated and hurt and angry about these
Yeah.
experiences. But where do I go from here?
I think there was a part of me that also had to realize that I needed to stop fantasizing
Hmm.
about the fact that I would be at some point have this. I mean, I'm doing this action with my arms because it's like, you know, this unconditional love and
Hmm.
to be somebody's priority and to be absolutely parented, even in my adult life.
Yeah.
I had to let go of it and just go, I'm not going to get that from these people. It's not going to come.
Hmm.
But what I can do is make sure that I give that to my children and that I prioritize my home and who is in that and who is important.
Hmm.
And I think that was what got me to pushing point, was just like, it's just got to come out. It's just got to come out because, and again, knowing that risk, but just thinking, this just has to come out because it was so painful to sit on it, and it really was painful for days and days. I was just getting so built up, thinking I can't keep going over this in my head, and it built up until one day I just went into panic. And then when I got myself calmed down, I just thought, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to make this call.
Hmm. Yeah.
And this is where it's brought me. But yeah, I guess I know somewhere in my mind that the same thing is going to happen again when I speak to stepdad. But what will get me there, I don't know.
Hmm. I think it's okay to stay in that I don't know place until you're ready.
Yes, that
It really
absolutely
is.
is. It absolutely is. And I think, whether you get some kind of help to process it, like I am at the moment with the EMDR, or whether you write diaries of your memories, or you talk to someone, that can kind of, that you can trust, or that perhaps wouldn't judge you, but having, and just work through it slowly. It's not a rush, it's not a race. You can take your time to decide whether or not you're going to have that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, you can. And I think that you grow up being so pressured and grow up always trying to please others. And now it's time to kind of take stock and think, what is it that
Mm,
I need right now and what works for
yeah.
me and for my children? I think that's a really important message for people. Thank you so much for coming on and
Thank
talking
you
to
for
me.
having me. I really hope that it helps somebody somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure that it will, because I think have lived experiences are always my favorite episodes to do, because there's always
Mm,
similarities in people's
there is.
experiences, but there's always such big differences. And the more people that can feel seen and heard, because that's where the power is in community healing, is being able to say, oh my God, no, it wasn't just me. Or, oh wow, that
Yes.
wasn't normal. And
Yes.
I'm okay that that felt weird. It's not me that's the problem.
Yeah,
And that's the big one, isn't it? It's not me that's the problem.
absolutely.
Because when you are
Absolutely.
taught that this is normal, you do feel like you're the one that's the problem. And you're not.
You
You're not at
absolutely do.
all.
Yeah.
So, guys, I will speak to you again next week. I'm not going to ask you where people can find you because you're anonymous. But I, that would be a pointless way to end. But I will speak to you again next week, guys. And don't forget, if you would ever like to be on the podcast, you can get in touch. You can email me at Harriet@Toby and Rue, or you can drop me a message on Instagram, either at unfollowing_mum or at Toby and Rue, which I always say this. Hopefully, it's going to be at Harriet Shearsmith soon, but we will see. We will see. Okay, I will speak to you again next week. Bye.